To the dismay of so many Native Hawaiians, environmentalists, and supporters around the globe, the condition of Mauna Kea is grim. This once pristine mountaintop, the highest on the planet measured from the seafloor, has become an industrial park in the middle of one of the most sacred sites in all of Polynesia. There are 13 telescopes already built in this conservation zone where 1,000 years of ceremony and the bones of ancient ancestors reside. Most were constructed with the assurance that no more would be built, and that some would even be decommissioned. None have been taken down thus far, and the proposed TMT 30-meter telescope would be the largest and most destructive of them all. Christian or Western cosmology, politics, and science have often expressed empirical and colonialist attitudes, frequently dismissive of differing perspectives. When profits are involved, the sanctity of nature and the kapu of sacred sites is simply overlooked. The mayor of Maui, Alan Arakawa, recently said in an interview regarding certain sacred stones in Io Valley, quote, "It's very simple. There's no such thing as sacred rocks. The monarchy declared Christianity the religion of Hawaii. Thou shalt have no false god before me. There is no sacred rocks in that religion," unquote. Exposing his blatant disregard for Kanaka a culture protected by state constitution, he simultaneously offended both non-Christians and Christian Hawaiians who still revere the Aina the same way their pre-contact ancestors did. It revealed an ethnocentric attitude severely inappropriate for a so-called representative. Unfortunately, this blatant bigotry is a disturbingly frequent attribute that has reared its tiresome head throughout these costly contested case hearings. $2 million of taxpayer money have been spent thus far on a case that is hardly closed. The materialist worldview that stones are useless, useful, or highly profitable but never sacred has led to unmentionable crimes against humanity and their environments. Through its lens, human lives could be considered mere collateral damage, and what sustains their lives as a mere resource instead of a basic human right. Meanwhile, it is unscientific to continue refuting the interconnectedness of life and living systems. What is done to the land is, in fact, done to the people. This isn't some antiquated native mumbo-jumbo, but rather a scientific fact based on generations of keen, repeated observation. Nevertheless, for many astronomers, businessmen, governments, police, and others, this property is simply a resource to be utilized, profited from, and even destroyed if necessary. This self-serving conclusion comes with a sense of entitlement, as well as a reputation for bypassing state, federal, and secular regulations, safety measures, legal permitting, processes, and local protocol with the host culture. In fact, they don't appear to even acknowledge the concept of a host culture, viewing the Kanaka Maoli much like a pirate might see the booty of a just and legal conquest. Unfortunately, the illegal overthrow and subsequent occupation of the Kingdom of Hawaii was and remains neither just nor legal. Even 130 years later, the native cultural, spiritual, and environmental aspects of the whole unified story are deemed secondary to the Western narrative. The questionable EIS, Environmental Impact Study, barely touching upon the cumulative effects of this project, is a perfect example. It has never been able to meet the requirements of the 8 criteria set up to protect this conservation zone in a historic precinct, as the law requires. Stretching the truth, and even lying outright to conceal that fact, has been a notably rampant occurrence. It continues to move forward without a permit, knowing full well that if the hearings officer votes in its favor, a scenario much like Standing Rock in North Dakota is likely to unfold on Mauna Kea. With so much at stake, this project certainly begs more than just a question or two. Why, for example, is the TMT Corporation so confident that the lease will be extended to justify an otherwise foolhardy investment of $1.4 billion? The lease runs out only a few years after the building's completion. Why is the DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources, and the OMKM, Office of Mauna Kea Management, who have already had scores of complaints regarding their mismanagement of this sacred place, being given jurisdiction to desecrate any further? There have been issues with oil, mercury, and hydraulic fuel leaks and spills, as well as industrial trash and human waste on the mountain. And how is it that so many of the previous telescopes were not even permitted until after they were built, while native spiritual practitioners must apply to the DLNR for a permit to build even the smallest ahu, or altar? Indeed, many other questions await those who look deeper than the daily news. Due process has not been observed in these hearings, wrought with gag orders, procedural defects, plagiarized and falsified testimonies by TMT proponents, and numerous other illegalities. On a positive note, one extremely beneficial thing to come out of these proceedings is the record left behind to educate those who claim to love Hawaii. Naleo TV has recorded every hearing, a veritable library on the subject of how colonialism, bigotry, and racism still operate. It is also an articulate testament of how the protectors continue to practice their love for the land regardless, fighting to the last aloha aina for what sustains life and livelihood for both native and foreigner alike. They have done this under unfathomable duress and continue to do so with admirable and even saintly aloha. In terms of land management, time has witnessed and will attest to their irrefutably superior knowledge. The protectors are not fighting progress, but rather fighting to protect the water and land for both this and the next 7 generations. The issue has never, in its insanely contentious history, been about the ineptitude of the Kanaka Maoli to grasp the genius of haole science, but rather quite the reverse.